welcome again, Frank. As I said, I will present you briefly in Portuguese and then switch again to English and give you the floor. Como eu referi, é um grande prazer, uma grande honra e uma grande oportunidade, digamos, de aprendizagem ter hoje connosco para abrir esta Confoa. Nós temos tido sempre excelentes conferências de abertura e a deste ano, digamos, não foge a essa regra, ter connosco o professor Frank Miedema. O professor Frank Miedema, como terão visto na biografia que partilhamos, é vice-reitor para a investigação da Universidade de Utrecht, é professor de Ciência Aberta e também é o presidente, eu diria que é a alma e o dinamizador do Programa de Ciência Aberta da Universidade de Utrecht, que é uma das universidades holandesas mais avançadas neste domínio e, portanto, a Holanda já é um país, digamos, de referência. O professor Frank Miedema digamos, estudou bioquímica e especializou-se em imunologia. Eu não vou referir aqui o conjunto da sua biografia, mas trabalhou também na área da imunovirologia, nomeadamente do VIH-Sida, e desde 2004 tornou-se chefe do Departamento de Imunologia do Centro Médico da Universidade de Utrecht e depois, posteriormente, foi até vice-reitor e presidente do Conselho Executivo desse Centro Médico, onde, aliás, digamos, iniciou algumas reformas do sistema e do método de avaliação da investigação e dos investigadores, que é um dos pontos críticos para o avanço da ciência aberta e que certamente também ao longo destes 3 dias iremos falar várias vezes. E também, em função disso, também em 2013 foi o promotor da Science in Transition, que é uma iniciativa que tem exatamente a ver com esta questão da reforma do sistema de incentivos e de recompensas académicas, alinhando com as boas práticas, promovendo a ciência aberta e reprodutiva. E aguardamos todos, e com isto depois eu vou passar exatamente para inglês, com grande expectativa, o livro que está para sair, ele já está anunciado, digamos, já tem uma página na Springer Nature, mas a versão online e e-book ainda não está disponível, a Open Science de Very Idea, que penso eu vai ser apresentado, eu estive a ver, penso eu que vai ser apresentado no dia 28 de outubro. So I'm now switching on to English. I was just referring that we are waiting with great expectation the availability of your book, Open Science, the very idea that will certainly be very useful and very interesting. So thank you very much, Frank, for being available to join us here today on this Open Science conference. This is not the first time that you are addressing that you are participating in an event in Portugal. You were here a couple of years ago on the last face-to-face event that we organized, because after that was the last one, at least of that dimension. And hopefully I will be pleased to invite you again to come to Portugal or to Brazil for another event of these events, but now face-to-face. So thank you very much again, Frank, and I will give you stop sharing and give you now the floor. So if you want to share your slides.
Thank you very much, and I'm extremely. You can hear me, I hope. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I am extremely happy to give this talk to so many people who are online and are following, and that's really good. I have to say to you that this is my job. This is what I daily do, more or less, to advocate open science, and I've done it for a long time. And indeed, in Porto, the last time, I guess that was. I will share my screen without further ado. And this is where we go. So I will, yeah. Okay, so I will talk to you about the transition to open science. I will try and speak slowly so that you can follow adequately, and that I will take my time. And it will be especially at the end about why do we have to rethink recognition and rewards? How do we incentivize and reward our scientists, our academics in academia? That's the end. That's the main. That seems to be the major issue now that everybody is talking about in Europe, but also in other say parts of the world, in Latin America especially as well, and also in Africa and Southeast Asia. So you're not alone. I will talk about it later on. So you can find me here on Twitter, and also there's a website for Utrecht University Open Science. I just sent the PowerPoint to Eloy, so he can give it and make it available to all of you if you want to say get back to it. Yeah, I'll do it like that. So I'm not going to dwell into for a lot of time about the problems of science. I think many of you have been aware now that since a couple of years, roughly 10 years, people have been publishing on, and also in Nature, in Science, in top journals like British Medical Journal, Lancet, have been discussing the issues in science. And just to name a few, I will give some more specifics later on. There's too much competition, there's no teamwork, there's a quality and replication crisis everywhere, not only in medicine or psychology. This is a general thing. And we are publishing commercial publication markets, so this is expensive. It's behind paywall. So my HIV/AIDS publications that I published, they were published behind the paywall, and we are not accessible in Africa or South America or other countries where HIV/AIDS was a huge problem. And this is, of course, not the idea. And knowledge about data knowledge, knowledge about the code and software, really a big problem. Everything is closed, everybody is secret, everybody is, protected. And this is, of course, not the idea. And then finally, and this is not the last point, but the major point, our relationship with society. Most of the science is being done for science and not for society. And I will show you examples in more detail. The overall impact and the overall aim of open science is to increase quality, progress, scientific and societal impact. And this is about research. And also when I say research and science, I also mean scholarship, like in the humanities and social sciences. So this is about all of academia. And this is well known. And this is why we are going in this direction. So open science is not new, but and now we are in a process where open science brings everything together. And I will show you. So just before that, let's think a little bit about what science was all about. In fact, we want to really engage with society. So engage when appropriate with relevant and representative stakeholders. So the problems in my country, in the Netherlands, may be completely different than the problems you have in Brazil and the problems that other countries in South and Latin America have. And also the problems in Sub-Saharan Africa, they are totally different. Sub-Saharan Africa is a totally different, state of development compared to Western Europe, for instance. So if you do science, you have to realize in what type of societal context am I doing my science? Who am I going to help solving problems for their and his or her context? This is extremely important. Most of the science is done for science and from the perspective of the northwest of the globe, if I may say so. And of course, define problems to be investigated, discuss this with your colleagues, but also with people outside of academia, the people who have and the publics that have the problems. And this is, of course, also, it's not about papers, but it's try to get your data to the people that really need it, and so that it gets implemented. And you see how I talk about it. This is my passion. I did HIV/AIDS research. I made a career. I played the game. I will show you the game. But of course, it was all for the good of hemophiliac patients, drug users, homosexual men that were suffering from AIDS and HIV infections. And we were trying to help them in Amsterdam. That was what I was doing. And later on in Africa. So this is what it's all about. And to achieve these goals, we have to share data. We have, if possible, and we have in several stages worked together and published these papers, open access, like my book, more or less. And if possible, we have to share our data, not only papers, not only final results, but also data. And this is also for code and software, so that other people can take advantage. And that it's not only for you as the scientists who made it, but also in the open. Of course, ideally, this was what science was all about, for the common good, that we always said when I was young. And of course, to get to this issue, we have to change the evaluation system. This is what I'm talking about. Before I go in this in detail, I think I will have to remind you, and I'm really proud that the open science agenda is very much pushed by the European community. And this happened in 2016 when Carlos Moedas, if I pronounce it correctly, was in charge of the DG, and he was pushing for open science. And he has been a main player in that respect. And this will go on for years. And there was a list of activities that they draw: rewards and incentives, indicators, open access, scholarly communication, European Science Cloud, where do we leave our data, fair data, I just mentioned it, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So real data that can be reused by your colleagues and also outside of academia. Research integrity, skills in education. How do we do open science? What is it? What is it all about? How do we relate to society? And finally, but for me, this is number one, public engagement and citizen science, which I already said on the third slide. So this is really what we want to do. We want to have public engagement and citizen science. We want to really connect with society. In my country, in your country, in Indonesia, in Australia, in China, everywhere, because this is good for science and society. In Utrecht, we started the program based on the same principles, and you see here what we find a very nice. What happens here? A very nice infographic where you see science and society. They're a little bit overlapping, but we want to go to science and society in one context. We want to bring science in the context of society. Again, public engagement. And this is probably a little bit difficult for you to read, but everything is here. It's about teamwork, it's about multidisciplinarity, it's about leadership, how do we organize it? It's cooperation, it's sharing data, everything is there. But to get there, we need this propeller, we need this machine. And the machine is making open access, fair data, and public engagement possible. And of course, also recognition and rewards. So if you want to go from the left to the right, to bring it in the context, you need to have all these 4 projects going. And this is what we decided, and this is also happening in Europe, in many member states now as we talk. And I'm sure also in Latin America, because we gave a talk last week in United Nations conference session in Santiago de Chile. So this is really what's happening. And this is, of course, this is hard. I will tell you why it's hard. So we have these projects now in my university, and I'm chairing that. This is about open access. You see all the issues you see here, how my rector is signing DORA, which is, of course, I'm going to explain, get out of the GIFs and the H-index and stuff. And here you see typically Dutch professors by cycling to stakeholders in society. This is, of course, symbolic, but this is what we all say, try to go. Get out of the ivory tower, get on your bike, and talk to people who need your data and need your knowledge. To get to this, and this is just for the people in the audience who are more in an administrative function or a dean, we have these faculty open science team now in every faculty. So we have there, and they are sitting together with the dean, and the dean is chairing. So we brought this program from Central really into the faculties. And the faculties also have open science communities where young people are also on board in this community where they talked with the dean. And this is the way we try to say, implement all these activities in every faculty. And of course, our dean and the board is totally in this scheme. They really want us to go in this direction. So what is the problem? A little bit of theory. This is the slide I use for 8 or 9 years already on a weekly basis, sometimes 5 days a week. And this is what we call the scientific field, or what they say in French, the champ. And this is really a field. So people produce articles, they are assessed, they get recognition, for instance, from cancer societies or the government funders. They get money, they hire staff and equipment, they produce new data, they produce articles, and then they have the next round of performance assessments, and they get more money, and they even produce more articles, etc., etc. And this is, of course, this is about professional interest. This is about elites. If you produce more and a specific type of articles, you're higher in ranking. So there's stratification. To enter the circle, to enter this game, you have to be a PhD and a postdoc, and then you have to work your way up by doing this game. And of course, this is also about money, because everything here is money. It costs money to have staff and equipment, have a laboratory in my case, to produce the data, to publish, and to go to the next round. Everything is, of course, also a real. This is, you could say, a business model. And in this business model, in the next slide, there are some real issues that were already on one of my first slides. So to the right, you can see we are just counting articles. We are counting articles in specific journals. we are counting not articles in open access journals. We are looking at citations based on totally, say, poor proxies. And we, of course, we are asking people if they want to become a professor, how much funding did you get? Sometimes people don't even ask, what did you do with the funding? But if you have a lot of funding, you're probably a good professor. And I was a dean, so I'm guilty. I was in this system for a very long time. I made my career in this way. So if you want to stone me after the meeting, please go outside and bring your stone. But you can only throw a stone if you're not guilty. Everybody who is in science, more or less, is already in this tainted in this power game, in this field, Sean. And of course, what's happening also, papers, they are in Nature, Science, and Cell, they make a lot of money because we publish our articles behind their paywalls, etc. And of course, at the left, you see hyper competition. Everything is individually, you're individually evaluated. There's no team evaluation. It is first author, last author. I came from biomedicine. It was a tough game, but you knew you had to have last author and first author, and then you were doing a good job. And this is, of course, is totally nonsense. But then, of course, no team science and no multidisciplinarity and diversity. And this is really hurting science, because if we want to address the issues in society, then those issues are totally, say, diverse, plural. They are very different in context. And then we have to have staff, scientists who really understand those contexts. And that is not happening at all. And I'm talking from my university. We are very white, very Dutch, etc. And so this of course shapes our agenda. So, and of course, at the top, finally, in this, say, power game, in this business model, the society or publics from society, representatives from society are barely away, most of the time not present. So we are judging, the scientists are judging articles, they are producing the recognition, they are giving money out in committees, and there's very little chance that in a cancer foundation, cancer patients or people who have survived cancer or who have lost patients from cancer are in such committees. So this is, of course, we have to break open this, we have to open this circle to the world. And this is already happening. So most of you say, yeah, I know examples, this is already happening, but this is not institutionally normal. This is not the normal, say, way to do science. Okay, so this is the problem. And of course, this is not an academic issue. Of course, this goes against novelty and quantity. If you have 4 years to demonstrate that you're a good scientist, you have to have 4 or 5 papers. If you have a very complex problem, it may be that after 4 years, you have done wonderful research, but not yet 4 or 5 papers in a good journal. And then the committee who's judging you for the next round in the circle game, they will say, well, Frank Miedema, he's nice and he can talk very quickly, but he didn't produce 4 papers in 4 years, so we are not going to reward him the next grant, next level of grants. And then my career is over. So I was advised to pick a very simple problem, to write a project and to produce 4 papers, and then I will make it to the next round, etc., etc. And so I became the dean. It's very simple. So you have to take a problem that can be solved in 4 years, and then you survive. And of course, it's more about quantity than quality. 4 papers is even more important than 2 very well papers, because 4 is more than 2. And so science is the art of the soluble. And of course, very important also in metrics shape science. You see the title. This means that the way you evaluate is also how people start to behave, and how the agenda is being, say, composed in your university, at the national level, everywhere. And that's the bottom line here. So our agendas are very much based on how we use the metrics and what type of metrics we use. And I just showed you those metrics are extremely good for a chemist like me. I was a chemist. I did immunochemistry, biochemistry. I was very, say, STEM, on the STEM side. And of course, I could also suggest to people that I did very basic immunology. And that was very good for my career, because that scored high points in the metrics. So you see that the system we use is not in favor of applied and not in favor of social science and humanities. So in my medical faculty, social medicine, geriatrics, real psychiatry, they suffered. They could not compete in the metrics, and they really suffered. And of course, so I'll give you another example. Say fields that have enormous societal and clinical impact, but don't score in the metrics, they lose. I can give you an example. If people study how stroke develops, that's very basic science and gets you into high journals. It's about genetics. It's about molecular tools. That's high church, I call it. But 90% of the people nowadays survive a stroke. And if you want to rehabilitate those people, to learn them to speak again, to move again, to feel themselves again, to have quality of life, that does not score in the journals. So people are advised, no, go to the laboratory that does the more basic stuff and your career will be fine. And if people are stubborn and they go into the direction of rehabilitation sciences, okay, poor guy, poor girl made the wrong choice. Slow church. And don't get me wrong, this is not an exaggeration. Everybody who has been the dean for 10 years in the medical school knows how the hierarchies are playing out. And this is really keeping us from the good science and from solving real world problems. So we have to go into a system where we accept also pluriformity, because imagine, so if you want to compare social science and humanities with STEM, that's nonsense. That's totally irrelevant. So every context, every science has its own indicators, has its own, say, quality and excellence indicators. Excellence is not something absolute. It's not coming from God. This is something that we determine based on the context. Very, very important. Your research on immunology is totally different than the immunology of basic science in a basic laboratory trying to do basic, say, immunology in the mouse. And of course, the mouse immunology used to be the top when I was a young guy. But now, of course, now we realize we have to have applied science also at the top level excellence. Look at the people who made the COVID vaccines. That's all top immunology and top virology. So, and of course, no say proxies for quality like journal impact factors. So it's totally irrelevant where you publish. We know that papers in Nature, they sometimes are cited well, but most of them are not. This is the trick that those journals just play. And of course, Dora says, stop using journal impact factors, but look at papers, read the papers, and don't count. And of course, this is already happening since 2012, mind you. They're already there for 9 years. And then, of course, engage non-academic stakeholders, look at diversity and inclusiveness. So this is very important. So who do you bring you in? What are the capacities of these people? And of course, we have to have peer review. Peer review means you really try to understand what people have been doing. If people write a narrative about their research, a story, really understanding what people have been doing in their time, in the laboratory, in the departments, in the clinic, and engaging with that story, and not only counting articles. And of course, so use of narratives, that's the way to go. Do people find it very scary and complex? Yes, they do, because we were used to count articles, to look just, this is five times Nature in 10 years, this is a good scientist. I don't want to know what it's all about. Now we have to really engage again. What we did in the early days when I was young, I'm already 68 nearly. So when I started, everybody was reading and nobody was playing that game, but we were all getting into the game. I'm guilty. I played the game, I made my career in the system. And so that's why I know the system so well. And of course, open science practices like sharing data, etc. That's of course the logical thing that we want. So how do we go about? In Utrecht, I was the dean for 10 years, and we started with a group of people, and that was called Science and Decision. It was already mentioned in the Portuguese introduction to my CV. That's the only thing I could understand, I guess. And so we started an activity saying we have to rethink science based on what I just showed you. We have to rethink what are we doing, and whom are we answering to? So who are we ourselves our clients? Is my friend the other immunologist the clients, or are the people who need the COVID vaccine? Are the people outside who have problems with parasites, etc.? Who is our client? Who are we catering to and answering to? So, and then you see, we draw up a list. There was a group of young people in my institute. It's a large center. I can tell you at this point in time, still 1,200 PhDs are working on a thesis. 1,200. That's a machine. It's a factory, right? And so, all these people were suffering from the problems I just showed you. And they all tried to do. So the game we were playing was, the further from the patient you are, the cleverer you are. So if you were doing research on patients, very close to patients, that was low church. So everybody wanted to be in the high church, stay away from patients, do basic science, and as pure as possible. That's still the idea. And in my book, I'm explaining that to a large extent, and there will still be people who say, wow, that's a total exaggeration, it's not true. go to a medical center and ask the questions. And I know someone in Portugal who played that game, but I'm not going to say it, of course, loud in this meeting. So, okay. So this is, of course, because we more or less still all play the game. I have to be honest. So you see here a scheme, and this is very generic. This could also be used for a psychology department or a department on, say, economics. This is very, very generic. And you see here leadership, collaboration with stakeholders, continuity, are you investing in your infrastructure? What about, say, how did you get your research questions? How did you get your agenda? How did you decide to work on a specific problem? Very interesting. And people have to realize that what they are doing and how do they spend their money, and also their energy, and also the energy of their collaborators. And then, of course, very interesting, of course, at the bottom, you see the classical things like research being published for peers, what we all did in the beginning, but is your research also used by societal groups? In our case, HIV-infected, say, homosexual men or intravenous drug users or their supervisors or their doctors. That was, of course, very important. I was already very proud when some of our findings were used to instruct and to inform people who were at risk for HIV infection. That was, for me already, I find it very interesting. But of course, for my CV, it was totally irrelevant in those days, totally irrelevant. The only thing that counted was articles. And of course, so we have these products for peers, and we all recognize that. And of course, recognition. Do other people realize that you contributed something? And also, very interesting, do the stakeholders in society attribute things to you, to your lab, or to your group? So yes, Frank Miedema's group, he did that type of research. He showed us that, and in Holland, it has changed the idea of how do we treat patients, or how do we inform patients, or whatever. That's what we need, and this is, of course, what makes people really proud, I can tell you. So this is now being taken from the medical center, where we have been struggling. I have to be very honest with you, where we are working very hard to get this system that I just showed you, this system going. And we are now using it for 6 years roughly. And it's hard, because this is really something totally different that most people were raised on. We were all raised on papers on impact factors, and now we have to discuss, we have to engage. We have to really do peer review, and really, and of course also take it from the more transformative perspective. We also discuss how could you improve your research, your group, the composition of your group, etc. And this is now taken to the university. And you see there we have the team and the research and the impact. We have professional performance, like for legals and for medics and for other people who go in society. How do they deal with that? In the medical center, of course, this is clinical care. We have leadership, very, very important, because if you want to really change the system and improve the system, we need academic leadership. Leadership who's not counting the articles, who is trying to build a stronger academic culture that is safe, that is diverse, and that has all the things on board to do better research for society. And of course, in the equation also is education. So are the people also teaching? Do they also teach it to students and to PhDs? So this is the scheme that we use. It's called Triple, based on the first something going wrong here. I will take you back. And in fact, we are now going in this direction. So this is but I have one more. Yeah. So this is the very complicated scheme, for you difficult to see, but you get the PowerPoint. And then you see here how we go from the left, where everything was researched, that was measured. We go, and everything was individual. We go to a system where everything is based on teams. You see here the team. And you see here all the education, research, impact, leadership. You see here everything is now in the equation. That does not mean, mind you, that does not mean that everybody has to have all these qualities. You can still be doing more education, more research, or you could be very strong on impact, but as part of the team. Of course, you have to do several of these to survive in academia, because you need that for also to be a competent academic. But it's not necessarily so that you have to have everything on board. And of course, hopefully you have more than one of those on board. That's the trick, and this is the way we go. And this is, of course, for most people, this is a relief, because now they say, yeah, I like to do education, to teach, but that was, of course, harmful for my research output, etc., etc. Everybody knows these discussions, and so this is the way we go. Look at it at home for a longer time, and you see a lot of issues here that are in this infographic. And this is a nice infographic to start a discussion at departments, with your deans, with your vice chancellors, with the people in departments, but also at funders, because funders are also going in this direction. In Europe, it's Science Europe. All the funders are there, but I know that also in Latin America, there's a huge interest in going in this direction, and they're even, I think, even more advanced in this thinking than in Europe. I can tell you. So this is where we go. If you take my old picture, and this is the new picture. This is, of course, my ideal world where we are going to, and this means. And now I start here. This means engagement with societal stakeholders, if possible. Not necessarily so, because again, there can be people, in the previous slide, there can be people who don't want to engage, who are not very good at engaging with societal stakeholders, but others in the team, they will do their job and they will team up together. And this is also, of course, multidisciplinarity. Here you can have totally different fields so for instance, if we needed to solve the HIV/AIDS problem in Amsterdam, there was also social science, psychology, sociology, history. We needed to understand where the gay say community came from, what their problems were, and how they felt about not being able to donate blood anymore, for instance. Okay, so we have to go in this direction. And this is, of course, also, we need these inclusive indicators. I just showed you many of in the schemes in Utrecht. But of course, in your fields, in your context, you have the freedom to take your own indicators. We don't have to go, all of us, to the same hoops. Science is international, but science is extremely context dependent. So the myth that science is international, that's totally nonsense. So your science, your country. So I gave this talk in South America, in South Africa, and we were at Cape Town. And there, of course, the problems of that society are so totally different from what we have in Amsterdam. Compare. And so, the idea that they think that their science will be judged based on our standards, on our ideas about science in Amsterdam, that's totally nonsense. And I came there to apologize. So I'm not here to show you the way, but I'm explaining to you what we did wrong, and don't go that way. Don't go that way. So you have your own choice, but please don't go that way, because we are now going back and we try to repair the system. So and this is what I really mean. Okay. Open access publishing, of course, very important. Fair data. I just showed you this is very important, but eventually breaking the circle open, making the circle open. Bring the science into context and bring the context in science. That's extremely important. And is it simple? No, this is really very difficult. It takes time, but for most people, this is, of course, if you're in the clinic, if you're in psychiatry, etc., those people understand that we need this badly, but everywhere in academia. So this is Utrecht. This is what I told you about Utrecht, but this is also happening in the rest of my country, where we have all the parties, the Royal Society, all the universities together. They are trying to make a new balance for recognition and reward, and they call it room for everybody's talent. So there are many excellences, there are many talents, and we need them in academia. And we need more than only the people who until now became members of the Royal Societies. I was never made a member. You can imagine why. So this is, of course, this is also the national funders. The national funders and Science Europe, the funders of all of Europe, member states, 24, they go in this direction. They go for narratives, they go for academic profiles, they go for triple, what I showed you, more or less. And of course, they get bashed for that. People say, "Wow, this takes too much time. It's difficult. Are you sure?" Etc. etc. But this is the way we go. This is the direction we have to go to, and they are also there, and all the funders are there as well. And I can tell you, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, everybody is going in this direction. The Germans in Finland and Sweden, everybody is going in this direction. Is it simple? No. This is hard work, really hard work, but it has to be done. And therefore, I talk to you about this as passively as I can, and of course, much too quick. But you have the PowerPoint, and you can peruse it at your own time. And finally, and this is really my last slide, Eloy. There's a new strategic evaluation protocol in Holland. We evaluate all the research in Holland every 6 years, and this is the protocol we use. And I suggest look at this protocol. This is for me, it's magical that this has now been accepted in Holland by the Royal Society, by the funders, by all universities, because the scheme is totally based on vision, strategy, and aims. It's about narratives. You have to you're not allowed to present lists of papers anymore with journal impact factors and stuff and how much money. No, this is all about narratives. What did you really do? What did you try to do? What were your aims? Where are your problems? And also, what type of indicators do you want us to use to look at your research? Because they are totally context dependent. And of course, then you see that there's, of course, research quality and societal impact and viability. That's all pretty normal. But also, we have open science practices. We ask people, how do you train your PhDs? Very important, because they are the next generation scientists entering academia. But also, mind you, 70 or 80% of them in Europe don't enter academia. They go into society, the real world. Ooh, scary. They go in the real world. And then, of course, we have to train them to be a good citizen as well. And of course, most of them are dying to get the training. Academic culture, what I said, openness, safety, inclusiveness, research integrity, that's all now on board in our evaluation, because we think the process of how you do science is extremely important for how your results will eventually be used by society. And of course, diversity and talent management are there. So I will stop here. And this is also just to look at home and look at the links. There's an enormous amount of activity globally going on in Africa, in Latin and South America, where you are, and also in Europe and in North America. There's an enormous amount of activities going on in this field, like the Leiden Manifesto, a Nature paper, going for meaningful metrics. There are in the European Union, there has been a lot of activities on career advancement systems. There's still a lot of discussion going on in Europe of how can we unite the member states going to open science, and of course incentives and rewards, because that's the most difficult part. So I close my talk here, and I'm happy to engage questions if necessary. This is my talk, and you see how I talk about it. This is really what we know, what we need. This transition is good for society, good for science, and good for science and society. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frank, for this wonderful presentation and the inspiring presentation. We really an inspiration and an example for all of us that want to move forward. And also thank you very much, because you keep your time very well. So we have around 10 minutes, a little less than 10 minutes for questions. We already have 2 questions on the chat, so I will read it to you. Both are from Luciano. I will read the 2 at the same time, and you can answer. The first one is, how crucial would you say public funding and policy is from a country's point of view for achieving open science, and how does it affect the time frame, years, decades, for actually doing it? This is the first question. And the second one is also for Luciano. The data and code sharing in open science is more easy to understand in the art sciences. Could you please give us some examples of open science in the social science and humanities research?
Yeah, I can. Let me do the last question. Yeah, definitely, this is also happening in the social science and humanities. For instance, people who do questionnaires on behavior in economics. All that type of research. That's not my field. I'm in biomedicine, but definitely these people are on board. And there's also use of code and software has been is a big discussion. And so the idea that this is mainly for hard sciences, although hard, of course, biomedicine is not so hard as you think, I have to say. Be careful. Don't let them fool you. And I know. So definitely this is happening all across academia. Of course, in humanities, people are struggling with open data, but if you do a lot of, say, research in history and writing about history of, like, for instance, Brazil, if you write a book about the history of, say, economics in Brazil, there's a lot of data raw data that people would like to see and can be reused. So don't make the mistake that this is only for chemistry or for physics. There's a lot of data now everywhere coming. Also in the humanities, there they could even say humanities 3.0 for big data. That is happening rapidly. And there, of course, is also the question. The other question is interesting. Yes, there's a good cause for public funding. Although I'm in biomedicine, and we also used to work with private parties, but you have to be very, say, clever. You have to be very serious against private parties that you are a non-for-profit public organization, and they are a private stakeholder, shareholder, and a private company. So that you have to be careful. But yes, there's definitely a role for public funding. And the funder that I showed on my slide was also a public funder, a government funder, and they are very much in this scheme. And they now realize they have to get more, funding for teams, and teams also that want to solve a real problem together, in multidisciplinary fashion, and that it may take more time than the classical 4 years. So people are redesigning their schemes of funding already. Also, the Heart Foundation, the Cancer Foundation, they all know that their scheme for 4 years was not based on what they used, what they needed with their funding, but what was the mores and the practice in academia. And academia was receiving their grants. So I did HIV/AIDS research, and I got funding from the HIV/AIDS Foundation when I was young. And they had a scheme that they were handing out 3 years, of funding. But my PhDs, they had a 4-year contract. And I remember that I was really mad when I said, we have to have grants for 4 years. And the director of the AIDS Foundation in the early 90s said to me, we are not here to accommodate the academic system that you have devised. We have our own ideas about producing significant knowledge for our clients, for our stakeholders. And that's interesting. Then you see that the big funders already are going in the scheme for longer term, multidisciplinarity, and also more thematic research, not that the idea that blue skies research will solve all the problems. We have to have a portion of blue skies research, but there is also a good portion of thematic research together solving problems. And we have to see that type of excellence is rewarded as the excellence of blue skies, because the blue skies, that's a little bit a Royal Academy type, they of course were always in favor. They were always in the advantage. And of course, I was also playing that game, so I know how that is. But now in medicine, for instance, we see, but also in other fields, you see that the hierarchies are a little bit shifted based on these discussions that I just shared with you. Is that a good answer to the question?
Yes, just to ask you what is blue skies, what is blue skies?
Blue skies, that is curiosity driven. That is totally I am a scientist, I don't talk to anybody, I have my problem and I want to solve my problem, no matter what. And not worrying about, is this really useful? Is somebody other using your data? And that we call that the blue skies research. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
So curiosity driven and no strings attached.
Thank you. I don't see any questions, so I will ask you, while I still invite other people to ask a question, I will take the opportunity to ask you one. I see in the academia there is open science is very so people are friendly with the idea, but especially people that are on managerial positions, so deans and vice-rectors for research, they might be afraid of really starting to follow the road, because especially they say, because the universal, for instance, on dropping metrics and counting publications, because at the end of the day they say that the university, the ranking of university will be still based on publication and metrics. So if they abandon the game, the university will suffer. What is your view, and what is your experience also there in the Netherlands?
This is of course what I heard when I started this in 2013. People said, how long do you want to be a dean here, because they will kick you out, because this will hurt your system. And the opposite has happened. So I think what has happened in Europe, in the ERC, but also at the funders levels, or say charities, or indeed medical charities, people have welcomed trust. Bill, Melissa Gates, they have been going in this direction as well. So in fact, people have realized, this is the way to do. When I started this, the director of the Dutch Cancer Foundation, which was very prestigious, and they were very much going to the basics of to the real curiosity-driven cancer research, he said, I need this as well. Of course, I need the basic science, but I need this very badly, like my example of rehabilitation science after cancer therapy. And so I think in the end, everybody is profiting from it, and especially a majority of people who felt disadvantaged, they are now advantaged, and their excellence is now being recognized also in teams. And eventually, this is what funders now do, and also Science Europe, and also in the whole of Europe. That means 100 billion euros in the coming years is going in this direction. Follow the websites of the EU and you see it. And and therefore I say, my last slide, there's so many people who are going in this direction. I gave this talk in Singapore, and they were starting a very small group of people that was called A-Star. Everything was nature, science, and cell. And when I gave this talk 2 times, somebody came to me after the talk and he said, yeah, I realized a paper in Nature doesn't cure a patient. And so we have here, we have a population that is aging, have a multi-morbidity, they have totally different, say, the diseases at the same time, and we have to see to that. And we need your type of research that you are, say, advocating. So medical get it, but of course they have to play the game, and they say, well, okay, we will be okay in the Shanghai rankings. By the way, Utrecht, we have never been higher in the Shanghai rankings since we do this. Can you figure it out? I can't figure it out.
Yeah,
I think they also change.
Yeah, we are already on the time, but there is a last question. So I will ask you for in 1 minute. The question is how to do these transitions. To this transition, are you saying it's a top-down movement? Is the question from Ana Maranhão?
Yeah, that's a very nice question. I forgot, but I think you need academic leadership. You need the board. You need the deans, because if they don't go, then you won't. It will fail. So you have to have this as a general feel. But of course, also grassroots movement. So young people, postdocs, PhDs, they also started to start open science communities in Holland. And the first one was in Utrecht, by the way. And we were not involved. They were just people also working in the university, young people who said, we want to go in the direction of open science. We will build a community where we exchange ideas and also practices. How do you do data, open data? How do you do open? What does it mean, fair data? And they have been engaged in that. And every university now in Holland has an open science community, and they are exporting the idea also across Europe. And I think they will be into it to do it also in Brazil. Mm-hmm. And of course, Portugal.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Frank. Really, thank you very much. It was really a privilege to have you. And as I said, I'm really looking forward for an opportunity to have you again on a face-to-face event and count with your expertise. I'm really looking forward to read your book. So
yeah, read the book. Everything which is in my talks is explained in detail, and also stories of experiences of resistance. Everything is there. So and it's for free. You can just download it. I paid for it, but you can. It's for free.
Okay, thank you. I will ask you all to give a round of virtual applause to Frank, because this is the only way that we can do it now.
That's good.
So thank you very much, Frank. It was really a privilege. Okay,
thank you. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.